6th. Battle lines form over social justice. Is it gospel or heresy? By Jemar Tisby. And on social media, I got in contact with, I think the other gentleman, I'm thinking that it was the other gentleman that was actually on the program today, when I listened today. The program was yesterday, or at least it was posted yesterday. And was basically told, no, we're not interested in dialoguing with you. We're not interested in coming on the program, not interested in talking about these things. We've said what we need to say, and that's it. Well, here's the problem. There were a number of things said in the course of the article. What really, really interests me is there is a section in the statement on social justice, not just a statement on social justice, but it's the one we're talking about, that says, quote, "We affirm that some cultures operate on assumptions that are inherently better than those of other cultures because of the biblical truths that inform those worldviews that have produced these distinct assumptions." Now, I'll be honest with you. I didn't write those words, but I read those words in the cooperative editing process. I may have suggested some edits to it or added a word. I don't remember. But it never struck me as anything other than a self-evident, obvious duh statement. Needs to be said, but it's not debatable. It's just that obvious. And yet there has been nothing that I've seen that has triggered the social justice mindset of so many than that statement. I mean, it's almost like God providentially put it in there as a big, huge spotlight that just turns on and tells you, as someone reads this, who the folks are that have been deeply influenced by extra biblical categories of thought, as Samuel Say outlines in the article. Jemar Tisby responds to it by saying, the best word to describe the assertion above is ethnocentric. He repeated that on the program. Ethnocentric. Now, let me repeat it again, and let me see if you can find where the ethno is. Okay? We affirm that some cultures operate on assumptions that are inherently better than those of other cultures because of the biblical truths that inform those worldviews that have produced these distinct assumptions. So all it is a statement. It's a simple biblical statement that every Christian should just go, yeah, duh. That is simply stating that the more closely one culture's laws and beliefs align with biblical revelation, the better off they'll be. And the farther away, the more rebellious, the more you suppress the light, the worse you'll be. But you see, if you don't have a biblical worldview, but you think you have a biblical worldview, but what you actually have is like a neo-Marxist worldview, but you don't know that. You call it something else. You call it a biblical worldview, but it didn't come from the Bible. It didn't come from that context. It's come from other stuff, and you've been told that's what it is. Then you hear that and you go, there's not one culture better than another culture. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Let me quote Jesus to you. When he talked about the cities of his day, Capernaum, for example, and then contrasted them with the cities of old, even Tyre and Sidon, Sodom and Gomorrah. Was there not a clear gradation in these even city-states as to how much revelation they had, what they did with that? The point was, great revelation given today, that reject the Son of God, it's going to be more tolerable for those other societies because of that suppression. Great light has come to Capernaum. Rejects it. Not much light back then. There will be a different standard of justice. Isn't that obvious? And so when you're talking about entire cultures, the more light you have that you then incorporate into the law and fabric of your society in obedience to God, that makes for a better society. But you see, the people, the world, don't have a category for better society. I've heard people who are Christians not recognizing how deeply influenced they've been by a worldly worldview, saying, how dare anyone say that one society is better than another? God says it. It's obvious. The only reason that you go to war against Germany in World War II is because you're saying our way of doing things is better than your way of doing things. Isn't this obvious? Yes, it's very obvious. And that's how overwhelming of simple common sense this type of leftist reasoning can be, that you're triggered by the idea that a society that has more alignment with biblical revelation is better than a society that rebels against biblical revelation. That's all it is. It's not ethnocentric. It's theocentric, not ethnocentric. And if you think it's ethnocentric, I submit to you that your worldview has been deeply influenced by stuff that it shouldn't be influenced by as a Christian. Shouldn't be influenced by. Now, there's a lot more in, but, and this didn't come up on the program today. And so that's why I'm not playing it. But after that brief ethnocentric thing, where he says, who gets to decide which cultures and which assumptions are closer to biblical truth? Anybody reading a Bible? I mean, you look at a tribe that sacrifices their children to a hideous snake god, and then you look at a nation that takes seriously the word of God and protects their children, and I go, better. That's not ethnocentric, Jemar. That's common sense, Jemar. Real simple, real. I just don't even know how you'd even begin to defend something. I just don't know. I cannot imagine it. Did you really mean what you... For most of American history, white Christians have claimed that privilege. That privilege is now being challenged. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing. You are so locked into skin color categories that you can't get out of the box. It has nothing to do with it at all. Anyway, he says, I'm tempted to refute the recent statement on the gospel and social justice point by point. Really? Well, I'm glad that you are capable of engaging in that. Showing how it falls short of the Bible's call for justice. But I think our time would be better spent on other pursuits. There's too much work to be done, work that will be delayed by endless debates. Yes, okay. I could refute you, but I'm too busy. Okay. Here's my advice, he says. Many of the people who authored and signed this statement have large ministries and platforms. Avoid them. Find other authors, preachers, and teachers from whom you can learn. People like Austin Channing Brown or the podcasters and bloggers at Truth's Table or The Witness, where I am a contributor. Or read Howard Thurman, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Brian Stevenson, James Baldwin, or the other writers who have explored issues of justice. If the supporters of statements that dismiss social justice as a distraction from the gospel headline a major conference, state your concerns to the organizers. If nothing changes, then don't go. If they do an interview on a podcast, find another episode to listen to. If they write more blogs, state their case, share other ones instead. So, what do we hear? We could refute you, but you're not worth it. We're going to segregate from you. We're going to put you off in the corner. Now, we're not going to say you're not Christians, but we're going to treat you like you're not Christians. Because you see, one of the ways that we're treating them as Christians is that we're saying, how about giving us some biblical pushback, some biblical interaction, something that's other than 99% of what we've gotten so far, which is just hand-wringing, leftist, progressive. I can't believe you actually said that. You people are a bunch of slave owners. Claptrap. It's just ridiculous. Just there's been almost no meaningful essence to what has been said. I mean, why doesn't somebody come to us with a Bible in their hand and a serious desire to exegete the text rather than, I'm triggered by this and I'm offended by that and blah, 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 blah. So you show that you believe someone's actually a Christian by actually challenging them. So I listened to their podcast today, and there were lots of things I wanted to point out where I'm like, did you hear what you just said here? Man, this is some, you want to talk about my blind spots, but man, I listened to your side. You are not listening to the other side. And when you do, like if you obsess over the statement on social justice and the gospel as if that's some type of power trip, wow, those lenses are thick. I mean, I don't know how you don't run into walls wearing lenses that thick. So I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to hear. I mean, it never would have crossed my mind. And so I'm like, okay, that power thing, that power dynamics thing, you don't get that from the New Testament. You're not getting that from Paul, but you do get it from the stuff you're getting in your universities and stuff. And that does seem to indicate a few things. But I'm willing to have Jemar Tisby on. I'd love to have him explain how that statement is ethnocentric. But instead, what we get is avoid them. Don't listen to them. Don't even listen to podcasts that they might be on. Don't read their books. Don't go to comments. Just shun them. Self-segregate. And I'm sitting around going, we've said for a long time it has something to do with, causing division in the church. And here's one of the main leaders, and he's counseling, division in the church. That's what it is. That's what Kyle Howard was doing, and that's what Jemar Tisby's doing. And I don't think from what was said at the end of the podcast today that the next episode is going to change any of that. I have a feeling it's only going to expand upon that. Good bit.